Okay, this is Shad Maria 2, and we're going to be reading A Friend for Derpy Hooves. Now, I'd like to say first that I do not own this story. It was created by Jim Dimitri on fanfic.net. So, let's get started. Shall we? Your Most Royal Highness Princess Celestia, greetings and salutations, Your Majesty. I am writing to you on this, the 4th month since my stationing in the small town of Ponyville, with my weekly report. Everything is going along splendidly, as it has been for the past few months, and I am sorry to admit that I do not have any great message of import to transmit to you. We are rapidly approaching the Winter Wishes celebration, and we are currently making plans to select a sapling to erect in the front yard and decorate. I am hoping that crafting the ornaments by hoof will help her improve the hoof-eye coordination, especially on a much finer scale than she is used to working with. Her job continues to bring her great satisfaction, and the updates I receive from her superiors are simply sterling. With the best wishes until I write you next, your most faithful servant, Honey Muffin. A young, tangerine-colored mare pushed the half-open gates aside as she stepped into the enclosed front garden. It was only a low wall, and so even from the outside, where she had gathered the day's mails in the designed box, she could admire it, the neat rows of roses and lilies growing exactly where she had planted the seeds only a few months before. Sure, they had grown a little faster than normal, but that was one of the perks of making friends with a flora-minded unicorn. Friendship had been her mission all along, after all. The scroll naming her current assignment had arrived several months ago, impressing the young mare because it had only been a scant few weeks since she'd graduated from her studies at Canterlot. The request had been odd, probably the oddest scroll she would ever receive, but who could turn down the request from the princess herself? Honey Muffin edged the front door to the little cottage open with her hip, trying to balance both the mail and the groceries in her front foreleg as she wobbled her 3-legged gait towards the kitchen. Her most recent scroll to the princess still sat on the counter, waiting to be sent, and bounced out of the way as she unloaded her day's purchases. She didn't have the house to herself for very long. She heard her housemate's hooves in the back steps. She was unloading the 3rd bag, and turned to greet her smile as she swung the door open. "Good afternoon, Bright Eyes. How was your route?" "Pretty good. I had to deliver a really big package. I wasn't sure I'd make it all the way to Grandpa Root's place, but I did all right," Bright Eyes replied with a smile of her own. Her good eye focused on Honey Muffin, and the other one angled in a different direction, as was usual for her. It had earned her the nickname Derpy Hooves amongst some of the less kind members of town, especially those who were still earning their friendship sparkles, which should be cutie marks. It was also the reason Honey Muffin had sent in the first place, so far from her old home in the distant, elegant Canterlot. Good. Could you put these in the icebox for me? I went to the market while you were at work. I thought we could go pick out for the winter sapling once you got home, if you weren't too tired," Honey Muffin returned cheerfully, smiling back at her housemate as Bright Eyes carefully edged the jars and bottle into the enchanted icebox, a common fixture even here in Ponyville. It was funny. When she first received her assignment from the princess, she'd been afraid the smaller town would be terribly backwards and old-fashioned. When she heard about how poorly the inhabitants had treated the poor Pegasus, her concerns grew. Thankfully, things had turned out much better than she anticipated, especially in regards to the wall-eyed young Pegasus. Honey Muffin had been briefed by the princess in her first, and only, royal audience, mostly regarding the nature of assignment in Ponyville. She'd been briefly informed of the town's location and general description, although the bulk of their discussion had been focused on Bright Eyes herself. She was something of a loner, making an anomaly of a town of high friendly ponies, and she had been shunned for it. It was generally assumed that the nickname Derpy Hooves had come from some of these attempts to befriend her, which often resulted in nothing more than a confused, wall-eyed stare and a quick shuffle in the opposite direction. How could those ponies know that the shuffle was due to the poor death precipitation rather than any lack of intelligence. I'm sorry about that. I'm so sorry. Although Celeste had neatly avoided the issue of how, exactly, the Pegasus had come to need her aid, she gathered a few things from the idle conversation with her and the other town's inhabitants. Although she had been warned the Pegasus was below average intelligence, both by her appearance and reluctance to converse with the townsfolk, Honey Muffin had found Bright Eyes to be surprisingly bright, pardon the pun. While she didn't get her to start talking, it would seem that it was simply... I'm sorry about that. While she didn't have the depreciation of an average pony, or the large circle of friends that seemed mandatory in a pony society, she was rather well spoken once you got her to start talking. It would seem that she was simply not used to being around more than one or two ponies at a time, as insane as that sounded. A pony shunning large groups of friends, that was like a fish shunning water. Understandably, Bright Eyes had not been very excited about the new pony invading her home. Her unfortunate little home had been located on the far edge of town, tucked away in a copse of tall trees, nearly invisible to the untrained eye. But a mandate from the princess was not as easily ignored as the other ponies in her hometown were. And so Bright Eyes had been relocated to a nice-sized cottage closer to the middle of town and the post office, under the pretense of making friends with the newcomer and showing her around town. As male pony, she knew every inch of Ponyville, making her exceptional guide for money huffing. Yes, as strange as it sounded, the Pegasus, who regardedly as socially inept and possibly mentally delayed, had been entrusted with the mail delivering route. How that logic worked, Honey Muffin had no idea. Luckily for Bright Eyes, it seemed that she had a friend in the gruff older mayor who oversaw the Ponyville branch of the Pony Express, and so she was given a decent-sized route. It seemed to be one of the rare jobs in pony society that were being socially in-depth was a benefit rather than a detriment, unlike most of the other mayors on our team. Bright Eyes took no time to idly chat with other ponies she delivered to, and was always the first one back from her deliveries. But no amount of best male pony in the month plagues could replace the void of lack of friendship caused in a pony. Princess Celeste had insisted. So, Muffin had been sent to show her the light, as it were. "I've always wanted a winter sapling," Bright Eyes murmured over her shoulder, her good eye warming with delight as it landed on Honey Muffin, the other directed somewhere over her guardian's left shoulder. "You never had one before?" Honey Muffin replied as she pushed a bag of grain into a cupboard, her eyes a little wide with surprise. How could that be? A winter sapling was as much tradition as anything. "Nope. Saw a couple in a pony's yard, not delivered in the mail, though," she replied simply, stepping back to the side to snag the next item for the icebox, placing it carefully in its place. It was a sign of how much better she had progressed, Honey Muffin noted with pride, that the jar didn't clank against the others as Bright Eyes shoved it blindly inside. She was getting better at picking up on depth, even if she'd never be an equal to more sighted pony. "Well, they're very fun to plant. And when you get to decorate them with the little ornaments. I picked up some extra glitter and glue, and now all we need is some pine cones in the forest, and we can make our own." Honey Muffin chirped. Oh, God. Edging the last box to the cupboard, and giving it a little push so that it would close right. This little cottage, lying dormant for so many years, had taken a fair amount of fixing up till it met Honey Muffin's standards for the proper pony humminess. Oh my God. The garden had originally been Bright Eye's domain until Honey Muffin had seen the hodgepodge little holes she dug, ready to be filled with seeds. No sense of order at all. But Honey Muffin had quickly received that, working with the shovel until her dark blonde locks had been stuck to her neck from the precipitation. That was her job, after all, to show Bright Eyes how a proper pony lived, with friends and neatly ordered home and a steady job. Bright Eyes did know that was her job, perhaps, but there it was. She seemed perfectly happy to accept Honey Muffin as her slightly bossy assistant, and what was that harm in it? That sounds really nice, Bright Eyes murmured, almost to herself, as she carefully closed the door to the icebox, smiling at Honey Muffin a little wider as the smile was returned. Good. Shall we go right now, then? They should still have some saplings left to choose from. And when we just have to get it planted and seed grown, it'll be alright and we can decorate it. Honey smiled, her long tail flicking behind her as she headed out to the kitchen, trotting briskly off to find her winter blanket. It was getting colder outside nowadays, and it was a wonder that Bright Eyes managed to fly around in such cold weather. Then again, most Pegasi were bred to withstand the cold, more so than little earth ponies like Honey. More Pegasi, in fact, had their homes in the clouds or trees, a testament to their agility in the air and attachment to nature. Imagine the scorn Bright Eyes must have felt, then, to not only be a Pegasus with an abnormal symbol, bubbles were an object found in nature, sure, but not nearly as commonly as a gust of wind or flower, and also unable to sleep in one of those cloud castles that each Pegasus built for him or herself. She had never seen Bright Eyes build one, either. It was highly likely that she couldn't, but Honey didn't want to hurt her feelings by asking. Heavy wings were not something to be proud of, after all. "All right," came the faint answer back from the kitchen, and by the time Honey Muffin had found her blanket, Bright Eyes was waiting at the front door, wings folded snugly against her back, her good eye locked on Honey Muffin as the other one wandered somewhere else to her left. The pair trotted towards the center of town in relative silence. Honey Muffin tried to make idle conversation as always, with gentle replies from Bright Eyes. She was surprisingly talkative once you got her going. She lit up like a winter sapling covered in candles every time a pony recognized and greeted her, though. Even if it was only happy winter wishes, Bright Eyes, it seemed to add a little bounce in her step, until it almost seemed that she was gliding next to Honey Muffin rather than walking. Although Honey Muffin had never heard her talk about it, she must have been very lonely before she made friends in town. They arrived at the winter sapling shop in the center of town without much delay, and began browsing amongst the little green saplings in their sparkly pots. Although it wasn't a physical shop per se, the seasonal setup was always seen to occur in the town square, just as it has in Canterlot for the previous years of Honey Muffin's life. "I like this one," Honey Muffin declared after a few minutes of silent, concentrated pursual of the rows of tiny saplings. Although each tree was different type, the special surprise that was on the morning of festival, each tree would bear fruit, declaring the type of fruit that would be enjoyed for years to come. Most of them were common apple saplings, but some were rare varieties, and each year brought a new wave of foals and fillies hoping for something particular special. After the festival, each fully grown, thanks to the floral mazage of the town, tree would be carefully, magically moved into each cone, family's backyard, to be dotted upon until the arrival of the next Winter Wishes Festival. The choosing of the winter sapling was a very important, very serious matter, at least in Honey Muffin's upbringing. The sapling she had chosen seemed to be the most sturdy, and she could practically smell the luck coming off of it. She just knew it had to be the plum from a pear tree. Her quick glance around the rows of miniature trees brought her thoughts on pear tarts and plum smoothies to a sudden halt. Standing at the very end of one of her rows, her nose practically touching the end of the smallest, feeblest sapling, was Bright Eyes. Surely she couldn't want to take that sad little thing home, could she? Didn't even look healthy enough to have been brought to sale at all, with most of its leaves falling off like that. Should have been taken home and nursed back to health, not planted in the front yard and decorated. "I like this one," Bright Eyes replied with a little smile, glancing back up at Honey Muffin where she had been examining the little sprout. "Can we take it home?" Inwardly, Honey Muffin warned with herself. She could be teaching Bright Eyes how to live a life the way normal ponies should, which including to pick the biggest, strongest-looking sprout to ensure many future harvests of its fruit. It was only practical, but if Bright Eyes wanted the little gimpy one, who was she to stop her? It was half her home, after all, and the one she'd been living in by herself, if Honey ever got released from the assignment. So after a moment to consider it, staring down at the sparse little thing in its pot, she finally spoke, abandoning her first choice. "Goodbye, pear tarts." "Sure, that looks like a nice enough sprout." When Bright Eyes eyes lit up. She knew she made the right decision. Within a few moments, the pair had paid for their little winter sapling, which, if Honey Muffin wasn't mistaken, had lost a few leaves when Bright Eyes picked it up, and were soon on their way home. The sapling tucked into one of the Bright Eyes' official male pony saddlebags. They had almost passed by Mr. and Mrs. Cake Shop entirely when the delicious smell of freshly baked festival cookies hit Honey Muffin's nose, and she stopped and turned suddenly, calling back to her housemate. "Bright Eyes, come on, let's get something to eat before we go home." Their breath fogging up in front of them, the pair soon darted into the cake shop, Honey Muffin shivering as she laughed at the Bright Eyes. "2 festival cookies and hot chocolates, please." Honey chirped between giggles, tugging the coins out of her saddlebag as Mrs. Cake went to work. As they waited, Honey Muffin's eyes happened to land on Bright Eyes, a small smile playing around with her mouth as she watched Honey Muffin shiver. "What?" "Nothing," Bright Eyes said in a soft little voice, her smile only widening as they caught the sight of elaborate winter wishes cakes in the display case. "It's beautiful," she breathed, edging close enough to the glass to fog it up. A bit of odd luck, to be sure, but if Honey Muffin supposed, Bright Eyes had never seen the finery of her own town, living so far from it. She was basically reliving the childhood she never had, if she had had a childhood at all. For every answer that she got about her charge, 10 more questions popped up. Honey Muffin smiled back at her, eyes bright and ears perked as Mrs. Cake came with called their names. The pair were soon at the road again, trying to juggle their treats when they trotted home. Honey Muffin shivering all the harder in the cold gust of air that whipped them around. It was only a little after midday, but the air was still freezing, the sunshine weak and filtered through the heavy cloud cover. More snow tomorrow. Honey Muffin glanced up to where she had been focused on the slushy ground, her ears pricking forward. "What?" "More snow tomorrow. Or tonight, if the clouds shift quick enough." Bright Eyes glanced quickly up at the sky. Her good eye focused on the clouds directly ahead of her as she wandered aimlessly. "Oh, are all the Pegasi of this good weather interpretation?" Honey Muffin smiled, tugging at her coat, trying to settle it a little bit higher around her shoulders. It was chillier than she anticipated. If only she brought her scarf. "I spent my whole life here. I know how the clouds move," Bright Eyes answered with a little shrug, moving closer to Honey Muffin to spread a wing over her chilly companion. Honey Muffin glanced in surprise, ears pricked, only hesitating a moment before she smiled and curled her lips as she snuggled closer to Bright Eyes' side. "Thanks, Bright." "No problem, honey," the Pegasus murmured, their steps matching as they walked a much warmer path back to their cottage. Well, that's the end of, oh my god, 18 minutes and 4 seconds. Holy frick. Okay. That's the end of Chapter 1. And be expecting Chapters 2 pretty soon. This is Shad Murray 2, and I'm saying goodbye to all of you. Thank